According to Tucker, you have to believe Tucker. And if you don't, it's probably because you're part of the conspiracy or the cover-up, because you're owned, because you become the establishment, because you're weak and you can be taken over by nefarious forces. The only man of courage in this routine is apparently the truth seeker Tucker, who asks questions but doesn't actually examine the evidence on these particular issues, because why do you need to know things when you can just ask questions? You've blamed society, you don't have an answer. So it must be a conspiracy. There must be some sort, and you're just asking questions. You don't know, right? This is the game that is played by so many corrupt commentators, just asking questions. I don't have to show you evidence that something terrible is happening. I don't have to actually demonstrate how the thing is happening. I don't have to tell you who the problem is. Wink, wink. But I can just tell you right now that there is a problem. But even, and if I'm asked about it, hey, I'm just asking questions. Now, let me tell you something about just asking questions for a second. Just asking questions is a game for children. My son is 7. He can just ask questions. My daughter is 10. She can just ask questions. If you are 50 and you are just asking questions, I don't think you're just asking questions.
All right, folks, so today I want to address the latest rendition of the beef between Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro. And the reason I say the latest rendition is because, as I'm sure most of you are familiar, this is not something new. These two have been going back and forth with each other over the past couple of months, mainly over the Israel issue, which is, you know, pretty divisive in regards to Ben Shapiro and his reception with a lot of conservatives as of late. The Candace Owens firing, etc., etc. And that all leads us here today to actually a beef that has nothing to do with the Israel stuff on the surface, but clearly, you know, you want to talk about the origins. Why did Ben Shapiro in this situation choose to do a 20-minute monologue trying to debunk Tucker Carlson? Obviously, that beef and, you know, this sort of divide in the conservative media space is underlying, to say the least. So I'm going to try to walk you through it because it's a little complicated, a lot to talk about. I'm going to try to go through it step by step and then just tell you what I think along the way. So let's just start off by doing that. So about last week, Tucker Carlson went on Joe Rogan and he said this one bit that was pretty controversial where he criticized America for dropping the atomic bomb on Japan and basically said, if you are trying to morally justify that, you are actually evil. And it was a little bit of a hot take. I'll tell you what I think about it personally in a second. But here is the clip on Joe Rogan that started it all. Here you go.
Well, you could say the same about the atomic bomb, right?
Yes, you could.
And you could say that we have to develop it like Oppenheimer felt before the Nazis did.
I love that. How'd that work? How'd that work?
Well,
I love, by the way, that people on my side, I'll just admit it, on the right, you know, have spent the last 80 years defending dropping nuclear weapons on civilians. Like, are you joking?
Right.
That's just like prima facie evil.
Yeah.
If you can't, well, if we hadn't done that, then this, that, the other thing, that was actually a great savings. Like, no, it's wrong to drop nuclear weapons on people. And if you find yourself arguing that it's a good thing to drop nuclear weapons on people, then you are evil. Like it's not a tough one, right? It's not a hard call for you. It's not a hard call for me. So with that in mind, like, why would you want nuclear weapons? It's like just a mindless, childish sort of intellectual exercise to justify, like, oh no, it's really good because someone else will get it. How about no? How about like spending all of your effort to prevent this from happening? Would you kill baby Hitler, you know, famously?
Right.
So I don't know why we're sitting back and allowing this to happen if we really believe it will extinguish the human race or enslave the human race. Like, how can that be good?
Okay, so there's what Tucker Carlson said that clearly sparked a high degree of controversy. Now, first of all, what I will say in response is that on the surface, when I first heard that, like I'm sure most of you, for once, right, rarely do I disagree with Tucker Carlson, but rarely in that case did I disagree, because I do believe that the bombing of Japan in World War II was necessary, right? I'm not going to call it good. I'm not even necessarily going to call it quote unquote justified. That's sort of just semantics. You know, you're trying to get into this philosophical debate, but I subscribe to the mainstream normal arguments about this that, hey, you know, ultimately it saved more lives than it costed. Japan wasn't going to surrender. You want to talk about the Allied invasion of Japan and the amount of American and Japanese lives that would have taken that, you know, are way out of the scope of what we did with the nukes. Okay, so all of that understood, and again, I'm sure most of you would agree with that. However, what I would also say, especially yesterday, because I heard Tulsi Gabbard talking about Tucker's take on this on the PBD town hall, is that necessarily what Tucker is getting at? I think this is actually a relevant question before everyone got so super pissed. What exactly is Tucker saying, or at least trying to say there? And maybe that would have been a good follow-up question by Joe Rogan, is it's like, okay, are you saying we shouldn't have dropped the bombs? Or are you more so saying we shouldn't celebrate, this idea of dropping the bombs, and maybe you don't think nuclear weapons were a good thing for humanity, which I think, is a fair opinion. I don't think that's totally outside the realm of normal thought here, right? And is all of what Tucker Carlson is saying here sort of meant to be in relation to the conversation over Russia, Ukraine, our current leaders, and sort of this idea that they are so bullish or, excited or just nonchalant about the idea of using nuclear weapons on a much bigger scale, right? So that's, again, what I would point out about Tucker's take here. It's possible. I heard the same thing you guys did. It's possible, folks, is all I'm saying, that maybe what Tucker was trying to say is being a little misunderstood there. But honestly, though, regardless if Tucker said exactly what he meant, what I would say bigger picture about it is that, at least to me, it is not really a big deal, right? Like to me, that was not even close to the most interesting part of the Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan podcast. It doesn't really, in my opinion, have a whole lot of political ramifications. I mean, you could argue, hey, that impacts how you shape your worldview. But okay, I disagree with Tucker Carlson on nuclear weapons. Let's just say, to me, that's not a big deal. Okay, I disagree with commentators on a lot of things. I would argue a much more fundamental modern issue might be a little more relevant than the question of whether or not we should have done that in World War II. But apparently, right, folks, to Ben Shapiro, this was a big deal, because recently on his show, he spent about exactly 20 minutes sitting down trying to debunk what Tucker Carlson was saying. And immediately, it started off in making some of the arguments I did a little bit earlier in the video, talking about here's why it was necessary, here's why they did it, etc. Okay, so these are the arguments in counter to what Tucker is saying about the nukes. Fair enough. But it got to the point where, again, I will point out again, this is not just about the nuclear weapons and that debate, okay? This is personal for Ben Shapiro. He does not like Tucker Carlson at this point, or he's trying to go after Tucker, because check out what this 20-minute response slowly devolves into here. And I'll be honest, okay, just being 100% transparent, I'm going to be a little critical of this, but take a listen.
There is a theory that has now risen on the right that there is something deeply malign about the United States, something deeply wrong with the United States. This was made apparent over the weekend. Tucker Carlson was on Joe Rogan's show. Obviously, I'm very friendly with Joe. I think Joe does a great job during his interviews. And there was a clip from this interview that went particularly viral. This is a clip in which Tucker Carlson calls the United States evil for having dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, ending World War II, and then suggests that anyone who would justify that is also evil, which is a very traditionally left-wing perspective. It is not traditionally a particularly right-wing perspective, because most people on the conservative side of the aisle tend to believe that America is a force for good in the world. And as we'll discuss, it turns out that dropping the atomic bomb on Japan was necessary for ending World War II and likely saved millions of lives, both American and Japanese. So when it comes to the moral calculus of leaders killing people, that's the realm of normal politics. So for example, he will downplay Vladimir Putin's evil in killing his political opponents and invading sovereign countries and killing civilian populations in those sovereign countries by basically saying all leaders kill people. When it comes to ending World War II by dropping the bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which did bring an end to the war, that is a moral stain, a moral blight that America simply has been corrupted by. So this isn't actually America First, ironically. This is actually kind of fascinating. It's something else. So the America First movement, right, which is the isolationist movement that was very well-trafficked and very popular in 1939, 1940, before it took a late turn into overt anti-Semitism, he's saying that America is and has historically been a nefarious force in foreign policy, which is actually a left-wing argument from the 1960s, that America bears blood guilt. In fact, it sounds a lot more like radical protesters on today's college campuses than like a traditional conservative. You hear that when Russell Brand says to him. It sounds like what you are saying about Hiroshima and Nagasaki is what the left is saying about the history of race in the United States, that America bears blood guilt, that America is in its essence guilty and corrupt and sinful. That's a very strange perspective, and it's not traditionally conservative. Just like, again, you can believe it, but it's not traditionally conservative. Tucker's narrative does have one important utility. It makes him the go-to source for everything. So to get back to his just asking questions, in this unfalsifiable world, right, where you can't trust anything, you can't believe what you see, you can't believe evidence provided because everybody's lying to you, and counter evidence is unnecessary because they hid all of it. This means the only person you can trust is the person who promulgates the reverse of any traditional narrative you've been hearing in America. It's a pure reaction against whatever is the story of the day. Whether it's true, whether it's false is irrelevant. It's just whatever is the story has to be false because I don't like the people who are telling the story. So they're hiding 9/11. And America's evil for Hiroshima. And Alex Jones is just as solid an informational source as anyone else, which is Tucker actually suggested he was prophetic on Joe Rogan's show. All our members of Congress, again, something that Tucker said on the show, every single one, effectively, are subject to blackmail by the intelligence agencies. According to Tucker, you have to believe Tucker. And if you don't, it's probably because you're part of the conspiracy or the cover-up, because you're owned, because you become the establishment, because you're weak and you can be taken over by nefarious forces. The only man of courage in this routine is apparently the truth seeker Tucker, who asks questions but doesn't actually examine the evidence on these particular issues, because why do you need to know things when you can just ask questions? And what's the point of trying to find things out when all the sources are themselves corrupted?
So, there was a lot there, to say the least. Okay, there was a lot there. So, we'll break that all down. Okay. But one of the central arguments I would make here, with respect to Ben Shapiro, and I do mean that, a lot of people hate when I say this. I do sort of view him as maybe a necessary voice in the conservative media space, even though I ideologically disagree with him, frankly, on more things than not, it seems like these days. It doesn't matter, okay? But I will say, in just like my objective opinion on this, I think in many ways, Ben Shapiro there is just arguing against a straw man, or he's just trying to muddy the waters of people who clearly, right? He's trying to muddy the waters of people who listen to Tucker Carlson, because he claimed that Tucker said that America is historically a force for evil. Where did Tucker say that in the clip? I'm still trying to find out where exactly he said that. He's talking about the atomic bomb and how he disagrees with that, and he thinks that was evil. It doesn't translate to he thinks everything America did, or most things America did in terms of foreign policy, are historically evil. So, that's number one, right? He is kind of arguing against a straw man there. Number two, Ben Shapiro brings up the historic America First movement and, maligns it with anti-Semitism, because why? I don't know. Again, other than to just, it seems to me, like muddy the waters there. I don't know if that was, super necessary or relevant to the conversation, but, like I said, they're basically beefing here with each other, and he just wants to take shots. And it seems to me it really was not about, Tucker Carlson's take on the atomic bomb. It was that I don't like Tucker. I want to go after him. I want to take those shots. Okay. So I don't know. Just, that's what it's like to me. Okay. So that's number two. And then number three, I think the part maybe a lot of conservatives there heard the most is the idea that this whole just asking questions thing that a lot of conservatives do, he's trying to debunk it. He's trying to say, don't ask questions, or at the very least, don't do this thought exercise where you think it's okay to just question things and spread conspiracy theories because you're just asking questions, right? He's trying to sort of muddy the waters of that. And he's saying that Tucker Carlson basically is implying, I should say, that Tucker Carlson is basically a crazy conspiracy theorist. Okay, so in response to Ben Shapiro on the just asking questions front, well, first and foremost, I again ask, where exactly did that come from? Because, as someone who actually agrees more with your take on the atomic bomb, at least on the surface, than Tucker Carlson's take, I'm also going to point out that to me, that segment of Tucker was not one of those just asking questions things. He was actually asserting, right? He was actually making a statement of his own opinion about the atomic bombs. And so you may bring up other parts of the podcast where he's doing the asking questions thing, but I think in this case, that is not necessarily true. I don't think he's asking any questions. I think he's saying things. But, furthermore, on this front of, conservatives need to stop doing this just asking questions thing. Ben, again, I do respect you. I do defend you from time to time against people who just think you are a total, subversive force in the conservative movement. But in fairness, Ben Shapiro, I mean, didn't you take the vaccine? And I don't bring that up just to gotcha. I bring that up to display the difference, I think, in Ben Shapiro's thinking and Tucker Carlson's thinking. The don't ask questions versus ask all the questions is Ben Shapiro is a guy who took the vaccine. Why did he take the vaccine? Why did he defend taking the vaccine? Because he said, well, look, all the studies, all the science, all the data is saying that it's safe and it's effective and all this stuff. So facts over feelings, trust the science, don't ask questions. In fact, he ridiculed conservatives who were against, taking the vaccine. And then what now? Very recently, about a year ago or so, Ben Shapiro is now coming out and saying, I wish I didn't take the vaccine. I regret it. I regret defending it. There were things that we found out later that I didn't know at the time. It's like, okay, but you did take that thing. And if you had, quote unquote, just ask questions, which to this day you claim is a useless or, childish thought exercise, you wouldn't have taken it. You would have actually in the end been right. You would have in the end been vindicated about that issue. And we are finding, of course, in our recent politics that a lot of people who are, quote unquote, just asking questions in regards to COVID or, foreign policy or Biden or all this different stuff, right? The Hunter Biden laptop, all of that. A lot of the people who were just asking questions are being vindicated as time goes on, right? How many conspiracy theories, quote unquote, that I'm sure many that I'm not even remembering right now have come true, have become fact over the past couple of years. And so I don't think it's very constructive as any type of right wing or any type of conservative to sit there and say that it's wrong to ask questions. But apparently that's what Ben Shapiro does. Here's the point I will make to Ben Shapiro. And I do this respectfully. I do this as kind of a bit of advice is if I were Ben Shapiro or if I were in Ben Shapiro's camp, I would have a lot of genuine concerns right now. And again, I say this as a friendly piece of advice. Okay, I'm not saying this to come after him, but I'm just analyzing, I'm speaking honestly here, that Ben is very rapidly isolating himself in the conservative media space and by proxy isolating his company, right? Because you look at, the Candace Owens situation, who he has alienated from in the past couple of months, which he used to be friendly with, okay? Candace Owens, obviously. There's also Tucker Carlson, who was on the Sunday special years ago. There's also Patrick Bet-David, who, again, Ben Shapiro used to be friendly with. They did an interview actually a while back, and now, Ben is going after him publicly, basically muddying the waters, trying to imply that Patrick Bet-David is an anti-Semite, right? And again, there are many other people here, right? And so I bring that up because, okay, you have beef with half the conservative movement or half the conservative media space right now. Fair enough, that's your choice. The reason I bring it up is because I want to ask the question whether or not that entire segment was really necessary on behalf of Ben Shapiro, right? That's what I'll say, right? You may disagree with Tucker Carlson. You may disagree on the atomic bomb stuff. Again, I sort of acknowledged I do to an extent as well. But was it needed? Is it really necessary to start the war like this or try to, escalate it in the way that you did? Was it necessary to spend 20 minutes trying to basically just go after Tucker Carlson for the, again, core reason that you're really mad at him over Israel and Candace Owens and you just sort of wanted to do this thing? In my opinion, again, I'm just offering a little bit of advice here. I don't think it really was. Like, why did we need to go through this? And, you know, honestly, I would have to imagine, I don't know this for certain, but I'd have to imagine that a lot of the beef that Ben Shapiro has wrapped himself up in over the past couple of months has not been healthy, or has probably made it very awkward for a lot of his colleagues. Because, you know, what is Ben going out here saying? Don't watch Candace. Fair enough. They have beef. Fine. But also, don't watch Tucker. Don't watch Valuetainment. Don't watch this person, that person. They're all, you know, anti-Semites or whatever. Do you think, let's say, Michael Knowles, you know, wants to be enemies with Tucker Carlson? Do you think Matt Walsh wants to be enemies with Tucker Carlson? No. I mean, just judging by their politics, right? I don't think so. But he's now, not only for himself, but in, I would say, the Daily Wire in general, are really isolating their network from the rest of the online conservative media space. And I again ask the question, is that a good thing for your brand? You know, selfishly speaking, is that a good thing for the media space in general? Because that's what we have now, is this sort of clique where you're either team this or team that. You're team Daily Wire, you're team Candace, you're team Crowder. You know, it's not healthy for the space, but I would also argue it's not healthy for any of you individual networks, right? Because you are putting yourself in a hole. This is a hole. That's a hole. You're not allowed to talk to each other. You have your own echo chamber in here. And again, I just don't think that all of this stuff was so necessary. With that said, folks, let me know your thoughts on all of it in the comment section down below. Again, I just will reiterate, I'm not trying to start, you know, total war here with Ben Shapiro, but, you know, with that in mind, I just do not think that his response there was necessarily good faith, and B, that it was necessary to spend 20 minutes talking about Tucker's opinion on the atomic bomb. You know, it's just like, that was the clip that I, again, didn't really think was that interesting. That was the clip that you wanted to go in on Tucker Carlson. What was that really about? Let's be adults. I don't know. That said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, Alpha Moves Only. God bless and peace.